All right, we are live with the Combatcast. It's the man called David Chevy, and we are going to talk some of the best of MMA and relive a classic fight. But before we do that, let's talk about who pays them bills.
That's right. We'd like to thank the sponsor of the podcast, Game Up. They make a thirst-quenching adult beverage with a special blend of electrolytes. Comes in a 8-pack variety pack, so you get 2 cans of each flavor: fruit punch, orange, lemon, lime, and grape.
That's right, and it's only 110 calories, so it's low carb. Enjoy yourself some Game Up. All right, guys, what do we got coming up, Chef?
January 4th, we're going to be previewing the upcoming year, 2025, and then we're back with fights. January 11th, UFC Fight Night, Dern versus Rebos 2. That's a pretty good matchup in the women's division. And then January 18th, UFC 311, Makhachev versus Sarukian 2.
Yeah, and the co-main event is Merab, right, versus Umar too?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah. We were talking about that because it's an exciting, it's the best of the best as far as the card go, but it's one of those cards we could be up late.
Yeah, take a nap that day for sure.
Yeah.
Might see some 5-round decisions.
It's very possible. Islam has been finishing people lately, and Arman certainly is capable, but I could just see those two canceling each other out too.
Yeah.
But all right, let's talk about some of the stuff we got today. Actually, before we even one other thing I do want to just make a quick mention of boxing. Nope. Try it again. Boxing. There we go. Usyk versus Fury. Usyk wins decision here, and at the end of the day, I guess I just really want to say is I talked to you about this off the air. I just feel like, unfortunately, cool, but not the best thing for the heavyweight division. Now we have a dominant champion, and unless somebody rises above the ranks, it's not like there's a lot of marquee matchups I'm looking forward to.
Right. This is not good for boxing. It's great for Usyk. He is arguably the best to do it, especially being a smaller guy. You know, he won a gold medal, dominated at cruiserweight. He's been dominating the top level guys multiple times, a lot of finishes in the heavyweight division. So
yeah,
very impressive, but he's kind of run through all of the matchups. He's going to circle back to Daniel Dubois, it looks like. Because there was some controversy in that fight, but it's not really intriguing. To be honest with you, I wasn't even super intrigued by this fight.
No, I felt like we knew what was going to happen.
Yeah. So I'm not sure what's next for Fury. I would still watch the Fury Joshua fight. Other than that, I'm not sure what's going on in boxing.
All right. Well, we shall see. We shall see. Yeah, I mean, I definitely, when Fury and Wilder were having their initial first fight and Wilder was knocking everybody out, that to me was the most exciting time in the heavyweight division in a long, long time. And it gave me some of those, feelings of old yesterday. And they had a great rivalry and they could talk. They were talking to everybody in there and they had their credentials. But now Usyk's, he's just dominant and there doesn't seem anybody close. And Wilder, the mystique is gone, unfortunately, for him. Joshua, same thing. And Fury was kind of the last holdout. And now it's like, well, there you go.
And there just hasn't been any, and there will be at some point, I'm sure, but there's no next guy. There's no new contender that people are excited about. So we're waiting on that for the heavyweight division.
All right. Well, I put it up earlier. Let's look at it first. Let's go back and let's relive a classic fight. The first fight between Bigfoot Silva and Mark Hunt. And I remember thinking going into this fight, Mark Hunt had kind of a real crappy record. He came over from kickboxing and, he was working on improving. But I thought, okay, Bigfoot Silva, who I'd seen get knocked out before but had power, I just felt like he was a step above going into this. But I thought it was an interesting style because Bigfoot liked to throw down, and Mark Hunt really had a granted chin. So I know that was going to be an interesting thing going into this. Boy, was that right? I watched this years ago. But watching it back, what did you think, first off?
Oh, yeah. So this fight was UFC Fight Night 33, December 7th, 2013, from Brisbane, Australia. And Bigfoot ended up popping after this fight for extra testosterone, even though this was back in the days when you would have an exemption for TRT. Well, he was way over the limit or something like that. But excuse me. But I mean, the fight was great.
Yeah.
Started off a little bit slow. Bigfoot did get the knock. He got one knockdown in the first round, but he failed a few takedown attempts, and Hunt was just having a really hard time getting inside of his range. And then in round 2, Bigfoot was throwing a lot of kicks and stuff. He definitely did not want Mark to get inside and land the big heavy shots. And Hunt stayed patient, was trying to work his way inside. Eventually, in the middle of the round, he gets inside, lands a good shot to wobble him. But at the end of the second round, Bigfoot lands a calf kick, which this is before the time of calf kicks, really. Benson Henderson was the only one throwing calf kicks at this time. He lands a calf kick, and we see it now almost every weekend with fights, but Hunt got a dead leg, basically. Had to switch stances and everything. Not really comfortable fighting out of a southpaw, but that was I did notice that. I was like, oh, this was one of those very early calf kicks that deadened the leg.
This is Joe Rogan would preach to it all the time.
Right, which also Rogan was on this fight card. It was
Anik and Kenny Florian.
Yeah, throwback combo. I liked hearing those guys again. Round 3, unlikely. Mark Hunt gets a takedown early, which nobody was expecting him to even go for a takedown, but that leg being compromised, he went for a takedown, got it, but Silva got up pretty quickly. There's a lot of clinching and short shots in the first half, and then around the middle part of the round, Hunt lands a giant right hand that puts Bigfoot down, and he gets on top of him. And he actually mounts him, I think, at one point. He's just laying a bunch of short elbows and punches. It did not look good for Bigfoot, but he did end up surviving.
Is this where Bigfoot gets cut open too?
Yeah, he got cut at the very end.
Right.
Yeah.
And then we go in the final round, right? Yeah.
Round 4. So round 4.
Okay.
Yeah, both guys start the round super active and exchanging. Hunt gets another takedown. He gets on top again. Bigfoot actually spins for an armbar at one point, but he's so up against the cage he couldn't really lock it up or extend Mark. And Mark's like a Ninja Turtle; he's just so stout and powerful. So he manages to get up with like 3 minutes left in the round, and they just start going back and forth, exchanging like absolutely huge shots.
Was this when the doctor checked his eye? That's what I was trying to remember.
No, that was in the last round.
That was the last round. Okay.
Yeah, the last round. Right. Yeah. So, but at the end of round 4, Bigfoot ends up getting into mount because Mark tried to do a takedown attempt. He fails the takedown attempt, and Bigfoot, obviously the better jiu-jitsu guy, ends up on top, and he cuts Mark with an elbow.
Yep. Because they're both bleeding in the final round.
Yeah, they're both bleeding. Yeah, so they both guys super exhausted. Obviously, this is heavyweight. Both guys super exhausted. Mark Hunt doesn't even put his hands up for his defense anymore. He's just trying to like duck and roll a little bit or just take the punches so that he could land his own. And Mark is clearly getting the timing of Bigfoot coming in at this point. He's landing the heavier shots. Right. Bigfoot's still shooting for takedowns, but Hunt's the fresher guy. He just kind of shrugs him off and goes back to beating him up. And that cut you were talking about, he gets a bad cut on his forehead.
Right.
And it was a weird part because Bigfoot may have been close to being finished at this point.
I just stopped the action.
Yeah,
right.
They stopped the action, had the doctor come in, and the doctor's like, no, it's fine.
And then Bigfoot starts kind of felt like got the momentum back.
Yeah, I think he got that little bit of a breath of wind, and I think, Mark had kind of put all he could into thinking he was going to get the finish, but fight ends, both guys are completely spent and covered in blood, and it ends up being a majority draw. Mark Hunt did win on one card, but it ended up being a majority draw from the other two.
Yeah, and an interesting note too coming into this fight too. I just wanted to point out because I didn't actually take this down as my notes originally today, but Bigfoot Silva was coming off a loss to Cain Velasquez, but before that he had actually had one of his biggest wins of his career. He knocked out Alistair Overeem, which
very impressive.
Yeah, and I had sent it to a friend of ours, and I had forgotten because Alistair Overeem came in that fight super arrogant and really, really just looked down upon him, and he fought so nonchalantly, chin up in the air, hands down,
like Rockhold and
really
Bisping.
wanted him to get knocked out at that point, the way he was acting. And Bigfoot just went. I remember I jumped up in the air, and I think I yelled, "Suck it!" And we were fans. I remember one of our buddies, we'll call him Cran. He went to me and he said, "I'll never forget that moment." I said, "Yeah." I said that was just, I don't know. That was just one of my favorite MMA moments. Watching Bigfoot Silva knock over. It made me want to review that fight at some point. So.
Was that kind of the beginning of the downfall of Alistair's chin?
Yeah, and this is also shortly after the Lesnar fight where he popped too.
They were both super.
They both popped. Yeah, which was really interesting too, because I mean, Lesnar was not the better fighter. He was not what he used to be. But just looking at the mathematics of it all, how do you still win a fight when you're like, how's that just not a no contest anymore? It was like, well, they're both juiced up, so Overeem wins.
Cancels it out, yeah.
Yeah, like kind of,
wild days.
It was, but all right. So let's look back at our classic fight. But before we get out of here today, one other segment we want to do: the best of 2024. I got some awards here: best male, best female fighter. Chevy, I will let you take the lead. You tell me what award you want to do first, or what we thought, not really an award.
Okay, so let's start with KO of the year. Who was your what was your KO of the year?
I went with Max Holloway, Justin Gaethje, buzzer beater, UFC 300. It was an awesome fight just because of the pace they were both keeping up. BMF title. It was one of those things where Max didn't have to throw down too, and he decides to throw down again. I would say, kind of ironically, though, runner-up to me would have been on this card as well, which was Alex Pereira and Jamal Hill, just for Pereira having to go, and then knocking him out, and then, doing the thing afterwards. I always thought that was pretty cool, too.
Yeah, I'm with you. I picked the same thing, just the fact that Max basically won for maybe all 5 rounds, and then he, in the last 10 seconds, points at the ground, gives Justin the most, who I thought and a lot of people thought was his most dangerous fight to his chin, the opportunity to get the knockout, and instead he knocked him out, and just thought that was a great moment. Obviously, that was KO of the year for me.
Just a sidebar, I really think the more we talk about this stuff too, I really think, and this is no slight on Ilya, because I think Ilya is just that good of a fighter. But I don't think Max should have went down to featherweight anymore. I know he had made weight years and years, but after making lightweight and putting on that kind of performance and then going back to suck down weight, and on top of that, fighting a guy like Ilya, I hope his chin is still going to be as good as it's been all these years, and I hope he goes up to lightweight now. Just because, again, he's not an old guy, but he's had so many fights in his career.
He's always been big, too, so.
Yeah.
He's tall for the division, so. Yeah, I'd like to see him at 155 now too. So
yeah, for sure. I think he can. I'm not saying he'll be champ, but he can make an interesting run there, I think.
All right, let's go from one finish to another. Let's do submission of the year.
I had Khamzat Chimaev with Robert Whittaker because I don't remember anybody ever submitting Robert Whittaker like that. And in the first round,
teeth.
Yeah, it broke his teeth on top of it all. So, I mean, it was violent. It was impressive. I will not lie. I had to look up submissions in this kid, but when I looked up and I saw that one, I was like, oh, yeah, that's the one for me.
I picked Dricus du Plessis' rear naked choke on Israel Adesanya because Izzy had never been submitted before, and he's fought all these guys, and their whole goal was to take him down and submit him, and then a guy who was arguably a striker, although he does have a lot of rear naked choke finishes, ends up being the one to get him. So,
yeah.
I picked him, but let's move on. Fight of the year. What was your fight of the year?
I went Gaethje Holloway. It was just one of those fights. Again, we got 5 rounds. It was an exciting fight, even though I know Max was confidently, I felt like was going to win that fight. But just the pace of that fight and the atmosphere of that fight was what did it for me.
I put an obscure one. I remember typing this into my phone in the notes, specifically for this segment when it happened. But it was Zellhuber versus Ribovics. It was on UFC 305. Ribovics won a split decision, but both guys were rocked in all 3 rounds. It just was so back and forth. It was a fantastic lightweight fight. So
one of those fights I heard about that everybody's talked about. I never went back to watch it, so in good conscience, I couldn't say that. But yeah, now I'll have to go.
Definitely go back and watch it. It was a fantastic fight. All right, let's do our fighters of the year. So let's start with female.
I went with Valentina Shevchenko. You could have argued Weili Zhang too. I thought she had a good year, but I thought Valentina just coming back into her own and beating Grasso at this stage of her career, to me, I don't know. She's an awesome Hall of Fame career. Kayla Harrison was another person I thought of too, because, coming to UFC, having such a dominant performance, but, I tend to lean towards a champion. Valentina's a champion and at this point, legendary career.
Yeah, I could see why you'd pick that. I picked Weili. She went 3-0 this year, keeping her strawweight belt, and just being a dominant champion in general. Yeah. But honorable mention in the PFL is Dakota Dicheva, 4-0 in the PFL, and got a first-round KO over Larissa Pacquiao, who is the girl who beat Kayla Harrison in the PFL. So she's a British prospect to keep an eye out for, as long as the PFL is around. But let's talk about our male fighter of the year. I imagine we're going to have the same guy here.
I went with Alex Pereira.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I mean, Islam Makhachev was a guy I thought about picking. Ilia Topuria was another guy I thought about picking. When I went with Pereira, I just thought the reason why I decided to is because I feel like this year he really put a stamp on him being a superstar. And I'm not saying, he's Conor McGregor or John Jones, but he's at the level of where Israel Adesanya was basically now, in my eyes. For a guy who doesn't speak English, for a guy who's still very relatively new to the sport, for a guy who John Jones is trying to fight, because yes, it's an easier fight, but also it's an easier fight with that name recognition. Mm-hmm. And you can see John was a little bummed when Tom Aspinall got that ovation at the press conference. But I just think that says volumes about the year he's had.
Plus, he stepped in on short notice multiple times to save pay-per-views.
Absolutely. So for me, it was kind of like that was the reason. Do I think he was the best fighter this year? Not necessarily, not technically, but to me, he was my fighter of the year because I just thought he really stepped up.
I thought I would be biased by picking Alex by picking against Ilya, so I picked Ilya. Yeah. He knocked out two of the best 3 featherweights of all time this year in Alex and Max. Max having never been KO'd like that before, and Volk obviously got knocked out right before that fight, but he hadn't been knocked out at featherweight. So impressive performance. Obviously, he has a grating personality, but he's trying to make money, so I get it. But very impressive year from him, and I think he's a star now at this point. So
I can't argue that. He's probably really the guy who probably deserves it. But I went Pereira.
I'm with you though. I think Alex is the biggest star active in the sport at this point.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about our last award or vote of the year here. Card of the year.
I went UFC 300. When you're my fight of the year and you have my knockout of the year and my runner-up for knockout of the year, it was hard to go against UFC. A card, by the way, that a lot of people shit on going in.
Yes.
Because people didn't like the main event. And I get it. Again, we talked about this, that was the main event, that it wasn't, George St. Pierre versus Conor McGregor. It wasn't this epic two epic names. It was, Jamal Hill and Alex Behera, but that card from top to bottom was excellent. And, we had some good cards. The last one we just did, 310, I think it was.
Yep.
I really enjoyed
and Pantoja, yeah.
Yeah, that was a great card. I really enjoyed that card. But when you're looking at name value, finishes, and from top to bottom, UFC 300 was it for me.
Yep, I also picked UFC 300, but Max's KO over Justin, like you said, the Alex KO, Whaley and Jan had a great war on there, and Sarukian won a number one contender spot in a 5-round fight over Charles Oliveira, and Bo Nickel was on the card too. He beat
the only UFC watch along we've ever done, by the way, too.
Yep.
And I don't even know at this point if we ever end up doing one. I don't know if I'd want to spoil it. Like, I enjoyed that one so much that I don't think that it's got to be a very special card and special circumstances.
Right. Yeah. But it was a great year overall for sure for the sport. Hopefully next year we'll get the same. Yeah,
hopefully. Like you said, there's a couple big fights coming up on the next pay-per-view. It's just we'll have to see how they unfold. It's one of those cards you can see where it could be very exciting, but I could also see it stylistically being a tough night too. So.
Right. Yeah.
All right. Why don't we tell me what we got coming up one more time?
All right. Well, January 4th, we'll be talking about what we think we're going to be seeing in 2025. And then January 11th, UFC Fight Night Dern versus Rebos 2. And then January 18th, UFC 311, Makhachev versus Sarukian 2.
All right, guys. Thank you for joining in. That was our best of 2024. And remember, drink some Game Up.
If you haven't tried Game Up, then you are missing out. Imagine your favorite seltzer and your favorite sports drink had a baby, but it's way better than that. Each can is 110 calories, low carb, 4.9 ABV. It's a nice light drink that is not light on flavor. Game Up comes in fruit punch, orange, lemon, lime, and grape. Pick it up at drinkgameup.com or at your nearest liquor store.